Uh-oh, what am I doing? This is a mistake. I'm in over my head. I'm about to speak objectively about a From Software game, which, to my understanding, is not allowed. Obviously, I'm joking, but I'm kinda not. Anyway, yes, it's me, Waifu Belector, your least favorite content creator, and today I'm going to rattle off some thoughts about From Software's latest offering, Armored Core 6. Just gonna kinda say whatever comes to mind in regard to this game and the things around it, so you might get some of what's good about it, what's bad about it, and what's just an indifferent fact. But this is a tough one to navigate because, as I alluded to, FromSoft fans are not a particularly reasonable bunch. They don't tend to give too much credence to silly concepts like logic, truth, or honesty, and if you open your mouth around them to talk about From Software, it better be to offer the entire dev team a blowjob. So you can imagine, for someone like me who just wants to come on here and give the fair and honest truth, it's like entering the lion's den. But luckily for me today, I don't really have to rain on any parades because Armored Core 6 is a good game, so I should be able to avoid most of the FromSofters' ire. But throughout this video, I'm sure I'll say some less than flattering things that will get your Dark Souls worshipping blood all hot and fizzy. Anyway, get your fingers ready to fire up that keyboard and insult me because it's time to talk about Armored Core 6. Let's go. So let's start off with this. What the hell is Armored Core 6? I have no doubt that a lot of people, probably even most people, had never heard of Armored Core before this iteration. Well, the short version is that this was a pretty niche franchise that FromSoft had way back even before the Dark Souls days, and it managed to have a whole bunch of entries thanks to its pretty small but dedicated fanbase. But we jump forward a bunch of years with the popularity of the Dark Souls series, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and the massive hit that was Elden Ring, and now the much more popular, much more accomplished From Software decided it was time to revisit their old IP. Now, even though this is Armored Core 6, FromSoft is counting it as a reboot, and it has nothing to do with the games that came before it. I know, why didn't they just call it Armored Core then, or Armored Core Fires of Rubicon? Most people had never heard of this franchise, and it's a reboot. Why put a 6 at the end? I don't know, but who cares? All's fair in strange marketing. What's important is, how does this new Armored Core play? Well, you'd be forgiven for just assuming that it was going to be Dark Souls just with mechs, but it isn't. Far from it, in fact. What you have here is a fast-paced mech action game with 3D movement that really only resembles other FromSoft games in one way: the fights are hard. Outside of tough boss fights that really try to push you to the limit, you'd barely be able to convince me this was a FromSoft game. So how does it play exactly? Well, you're obviously in a mech, and like I said, it has 3D movement, so you don't just move on the horizontal plane like in most FromSoft games. You can also move vertically, and you do so rather quickly. Now, your mech is equipped with up to 4 weapons at once, a weapon for each arm and a weapon for each shoulder. And there are a lot of different kinds of weapons you can use, as well as a lot of different parts that make up your mech itself. You know, arms, torso, legs, head, boosters, batteries, you name it. There are a lot of choices in each category, and they have a ton of effects, making you heavier or lighter, which affects your movement. Maybe something makes you ascend faster or boost forward faster. You can alter your fuel and energy efficiency. Obviously, certain parts give you more health. And then, of course, they all have their own drawbacks, and it's possible to be too overweight or over the energy limit of your particular build. It sounds like a lot, and it is a lot to play with, but not a lot to digest. This is all way easier to consume than it sounds, and it does a good job of often making hard fights not seem impossible because, you know, you have so many more options to try out. I also want to give kudos to this game's targeting and lock-on respawn system, which is really well made and has to be the way it is for this specific game. Just when you think about how the game is played and what the devs are going for, this targeting system is just the most logical thing in the world. It really helps to sell the whole I'm in a mech thing, and it's all just very specific to this game. Now, one of the most standout things about this game for me, seeing as how this is a FromSoft game, was the fact that this is a normal game. It's just an actual game that wants to be played and wants to be experienced and doesn't have a shit ton of annoying, questionable design elements that it incorrectly labels as difficulty. The biggest of which is the checkpointing. Guys, I shit you not, believe it or not, Armored Core 6 has good checkpointing. I know, right? I couldn't fucking believe it. When a boss kills you, you don't have to fight a bunch of annoying lesser enemies that have nothing to do with anything just to try again. You don't have to take some long drawn out walk back and dodge fodder enemies. Nope. When you die to a boss, it just puts you right back in front of the boss and you try again. It's fucking unbelievable. Has From Software realized that tedium is not a skill check? This may have restored my faith in humanity. No, but seriously, this game does just get straight to the point for better and sometimes for worse. Now listen, while the gameplay and combat are good and pretty fun, it's far from perfect, possibly because of how they balance some of the fundamental rules of the combat. Often in a lot of fast-paced games where the player has a dash, the dash has invincibility frames, which is a small window during the dash that you are invulnerable to damage. Armored Core 6 is not one of those games. You do have a dash, but it does not have invincibility. So if you want to get out of the way of something, you've really got to get out of the way. Cool. And I believe they made this decision because the game may have proven too easy had they not. But then there's just a small problem of a lot of boss enemies having attacks that just flat out never miss. Now, I say never, but that's a small exaggeration. It's more like 85 to 90% of the time, no matter how fast you move or what direction you go in, at whatever altitude, these moves will hit you. And like I said, a lot of the bosses are equipped with these types of moves. And at some of the shittier times of the game, those moves are ridiculously powerful. The only thing that seems to throw these high accuracy attacks off your scent is to be directly underneath the enemy. But that's easier said than done against most of them. And the bosses having these attacks isn't exactly game breaking, but it comes off a little cheap and a little silly at times. You have some barriers that you can mount to one of your shoulders and deploy to mitigate damage in an instance where you can't dodge, but like I said, some of these moves are extremely powerful and will stagger you straight through the barrier, and other bosses use these kinds of homing moves so frequently that you can't use your barrier enough, which kind of leads into my other issue with the combat. There is definitely a might is right attitude in Armored Core 6. For all the gear and upgrades and whatever the hell else you can play with, there unfortunately is some semblance of a correct build in my opinion. Defensive builds just don't work in most of the actually challenging instances, and you absolutely need a certain level of speed and propulsion to win. The game plan is to be fairly fast and extremely hard hitting. Doing anything else is going to be all the more difficult. This is something I found out at the start of chapter 3, which is about halfway through the game. I had tried a lot of different weapons and builds, but then I stumbled on the mini tank athletic wheelchair wheels and started using double grenade launchers on each shoulder with the rocket launcher in the left hand and a minigun in the right. From that point forward, the game became a relative breeze, and I stomped through a lot of it, including every single A and S rank arena challenge. And I say a relative breeze because the game still provides challenge and some of the final bosses are hard as hell, but I couldn't for the life of me find anything that worked half as well as this setup. Now, the setup I mentioned was the setup I was using, but there would be times where I would swap an item to account for the specific enemy. Like when I fought an enemy who moved too fast for my left-hand launcher to land, I swapped it out for a wider, short-ranged Hellfire explosive, or a late-game boss who had a powerful force field, where I swapped that same launcher armament for a sword and my right shoulder grenades for a pulse weapon that could do good against shields. Regardless of the couple of times I had to swap specific weapons, the aggression and mobility framework of my mech stayed the same, because it was the correct way to play. Anytime throughout my playthrough I attempted to sacrifice offensive pressure or mobility in favor of health or defensive capability, it proved to make things more difficult, which is kinda unfortunate in a game that presents itself in a way that says, tackle problems your way. Now, I mentioned earlier that the game gets straight to the point, and that's kinda the way the missions and progression are structured too. I'm talking a lot of short 5-minute missions that strategically jump all over the place, from one mission being easy as pie to the next being fairly easy but with a gimmick that's easy to die to, and then missions that pit you against a tough-ass enemy. The short missions and the fast pace of not just the combat but the structure of the game helped to continually give you a sense of accomplishment that made my 15-hour playthrough feel like a nice sweet 8-hour experience. It's just that once you realize that relentless assault is the answer in this game, you kinda start to see that it is a pretty basic mech shooter that's almost indie in its simplistic design, and if not for some tough as nails bosses, you might be asleep at the wheel during the game's back nine. And listen, what I'm about to say doesn't really deduct much value for me, but it is a little disappointing. The enemy designs and mechs and all that sort of thing are not anywhere near what we typically expect of From Software. These are all pretty generic gray and beige robots with nothing standout about them, honestly. But I guess FromSoft is just better when it comes to writing and designing dark fantasy. Anyway, when it's all said and done, this is a good game that provides good challenge, actual difficulty in a true sense without trying to aggravate you for the sake of it. It's paced well and doesn't feel particularly draining until you die 15 times to the same boss, but that's the gig. It has this double-edged sword of incredibly simple level design. It kinda hurts itself by undermining its own customization, and when you're playing it, even though it doesn't feel like it's all that common to be playing something that feels quite like this, it doesn't feel particularly remarkable or all that memorable either. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say it's a 7 out of 10. Well worth the play, especially if you're looking for a nice spicy challenge. But okay, I'm done. Let me know what you guys think if you've played Armored Core 6, or if you are or aren't gonna play it based on anything I've said here. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or consider subscribing, and don't forget to hop in the comments and tell me how stupid and wrong I am. I know you like that. I'm looking at you, From Softers. But until next time, I am Waifu Belector. I am just a normal guy. I like hentai and I like checkpoints. Goodbye.